Chapter 32. If it wasn't for the regent, the former empress wouldn't have died. Perhaps she would still be the empress of the Feng country. In short, no matter if the regent likes the former empress or feels guilty about her, if I were the former empress, I would turn my nose up at the regent. A sanctimonious man like you doesn't have the right to like her. Concubine. Shuangshi was so scared that she almost lost her voice. Plop. She knelt on the ground. Regent, please calm down. My concubine. Concubine Shun, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. You're not my master. How would you know my master's difficulties? I can't imagine what difficulties the regent of the Feng nation, who holds all the power in the country, would have. Your master committed adultery with the former empress, and the former empress was cruelly executed by the emperor. Isn't your master safe and sound, and no one dares to touch him? Xin Yueji sneered and looked at Ji Chu. Forgive me for being a woman, but I really don't understand the difficulties that Garji mentioned. What are you referring to? Ji Chu's expression was ugly. He looked at Imo Wushang's cold face and gritted his teeth. May I ask, concubine Shun, when you were infatuated with my master, it was wishful thinking, but you couldn't get a response from him in your heart, who said that I was infatuated with him. Xin Yueji interrupted his words halfway. If Bin Gong liked him, then Bin Gong wouldn't have entered the palace again. Bin Gong doesn't like him, it's just that I'm curious. To be honest, Bin Gong doesn't like someone like the regent. I was curious because I was blind. You, master. Thinking that Imo Wushang would be angry, Xin Yueji was prepared to fall out with him. She couldn't beat him in a fight. She didn't want to cower in front of him. She was really afraid of him. After all, the death of her predecessor made it impossible for her to get over him. Seeing that the man didn't say a word and his cold aura was oppressive, she couldn't feel the power emanating from him. It was as if there was only endless sadness and melancholy. She watched him walk out of the hall without saying a word. His tall and slender figure was like a mountain. No one can be like my master, who can disregard his own life and death for a single person, not caring about his mission. Even more so, no one would be like my master, standing alone in the imperial city in the dead of winter. He would stand there for an entire night and stare in a daze at the palace of his beloved woman. No, when she was hurt, when someone framed her, my master silently swept away all obstacles for her. It can't be that when that person hated my master and asked my master to get lost, my master still wholeheartedly protected her from behind. After knowing that she was sick and injured, my master covered her whole body in blood just to test how painful it was. She was in pain, and he was in a place she didn't know, silently suffering with her. The pain was 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times. Perhaps it was because he was talking about something that he had suppressed in his heart for many years. Ji Chu became very emotional, and his voice trembled. Chapter 33. You can question anything but my master's feelings for Miss Gu. The man's eyes were red. He bowed and cupped his hands. I'll take my leave. No wonder the Prince Regent doesn't get close to women. He even turned a blind eye to your highness's years of love. It turns out that he already has someone in his heart. It's the first miss of the Gu family. Shuangshi got up from the ground. She still couldn't digest what Ji Chu said before he left. Besides shock, there was also heartache. Your Highness, don't be too sad. There are very few men in this world who love each other deeply. You should be glad that you didn't misjudge the Prince Regent. He is a good man. Was this Empress wrong? Xin Yueji sat on the chaise longue, feeling lost. Was she really wrong? Imo Wushang never wanted to hurt her. It was her own wishful thinking. She used to think that they had no grudge against each other. She couldn't understand why he wanted to frame her. Why did he want to ruin her reputation? Your Highness, it's not wrong to like someone. Fortunately, you have entered the palace now. You have nothing to do with the Prince Regent. Nyang Nyang, put away your thoughts on the Prince Regent and place them on His Majesty. In fact, His Majesty treats Nyang Nyang very well. Shuangshi, if you like someone but can't get a response from that person, will you give up? Well, Shuangshi held her chin and thought seriously. This should be calculated according to each person's character. If this servant falls in love with a man in the future, and that man doesn't like this servant, this servant will definitely withdraw her feelings in time. But the words that Garji said before he left, the Prince Regent seemed to have done a lot for the former Empress, but he couldn't get a response from her. Is it because love turns to hate? No, no, no. Shuangxi shook her head. If love turns to hate, the Prince Regent wouldn't have wanted to drain the South Lake. He wouldn't have tortured himself after the death of the former Empress. Then why? Because he misses her. After the death of the former Empress, the Prince Regent stayed in his room alone, standing in front of the window and looking in the direction of the palace. Your Highness, this servant can't believe that the Prince Regent has such deep feelings for the late Empress. But then why did he not care when the late Empress was executed by the Emperor? Never appeared before? I'm not too sure about this either. However, on the day the late Empress sank into the lake, I vaguely heard the conversation between the eldest young master and the general. The Prince Regent doesn't seem to be in the Phone Kingdom. As for where he went, I don't know. Do you hate me so much in your heart? She still remembered that when she woke up that day, she saw a man in the same disheveled clothes as her on the phoenix bed. She was frightened, panicked, disgusted, hateful. He held her in his arms. She struggled with all her might. She could not see the expression on his face. That hoarse and deep voice, filled with pain and torment, was unlike him. He said, "Why? Why do you only have eyes for him? Why are you unwilling to look at me?" He hugged her tightly, as if he wanted to embed her into his body and become one with him. She could do nothing but cry and hurl insults at him. Chapter 34. Coming back to her senses from her panic, she realized that there was nothing strange about her body after sex. She knew that nothing had happened between them. She resisted so fiercely because she knew that someone must have deliberately framed her. She wanted him to go, to let him leave. She didn't want Feng Juqing to find out. She knew that he wouldn't believe her. Your Highness, what's wrong with you? Why is your face so pale? Are you not feeling well? Double Happiness's worried voice brought her back to reality. Xin Yueji looked down at her and rubbed her eyebrows. I'm fine. Maybe my hands have been soaked for too long, and the poison has spread to my head. Double Happiness. In any case, this poison was planted by you, your ladyship. How can that imperial physician Lu compare to your ladyship who can prescribe the right medicine? Your ladyship is really honest. Do you really plan to soak for a few hours? Xin Yueji forced a smile. How can I be honest after entering the palace? She didn't think about Mo Wushang. Feng Juqing, Gu Yuan, and the Gu family still hurt her. Xin Yueji moved her lips and looked at her pale face in the basin. The regent is actually quite good. Do you think I should try to like him again? What? Hearing this, Double Happiness was shocked and stared at her in horror. Your Highness, you are crazy. Are you going to cheat on His Majesty? What do you mean cheat on His Majesty? Why are your words so unpleasant? Xin Yueji teased her. Besides, there are 3,000 beauties in His Majesty's harem. Do you really want your miss to be alone? No, this servant is worried about your Highness. If your Highness still doesn't know what's good for you and offends the Prince Regent, what if he kills you? Ah, with a scream, Double Happiness hurriedly wiped the warm water she had splashed on her face. Your Highness, what are you doing? This medicine is for soaking your hands. You used it on my face. If my face is the same as the Empress, how can I face others? In your heart, do you think this consort is so useless? How could he be killed so easily? At that time, her ladyship went to see the excitement of the late Empress being drowned in the lake. She was even pushed into the lake by a weak woman and almost drowned. Double Happiness mumbled softly. Xin Yueji was about to splash water on her again. Shuangxi was shocked and quickly ran outside. Your ladyship, this servant was wrong. Ah! As Double Happiness ran out, another blood-curdling scream came from her mouth. It resounded through the clouds. Xin Yueji was startled. She quickly got up and walked outside. Goddess! Goddess! Ghost! Ghost! Shuangxi hid behind her in fear. She pointed a trembling finger at a man with messy hair and a stinky stench in front of her. He was covered in filth. His disheveled hair covered his face, making it impossible to see what he looked like. This was the Phoenix Perch Palace. With Shen Yueji's status as the noble consort, ordinary people were not qualified to come here. She stared at the man for a moment. He lowered his head, and his messy hair hung down. The stench from his body was really strong, mixed with the strong smell of alcohol. Shen Yueji looked a little familiar with this figure. Even double happiness, after calming down the fear in her heart, looked at the man in front of her, who was worse than a beggar. The more she looked, the more familiar she felt. She called out tentatively, "First, young master?" The man didn't answer. Chapter 35. The man finally responded. The first thing he moved was his hand. When she saw his big black hand reaching for her, Shen Yueji blushed with shame. She stared at his big black hand and didn't move for a long time. The man raised his head, probably because he was too anxious. His face didn't change much, except that he was thinner, and there was a beard on the corner of his mouth. He looked very tired and weak, as if he could be blown away by a gust of wind. Shen Yueji looked at his body carefully and found that he had lost a lot of weight since she entered the palace for more than a month. She felt warm in her heart, even if she wasn't the real Shen Yueji. She occupied Shen Yueji's body and felt the Shen family's love and care for her. She envied Shen Yueji for having such a good brother. For her, he could really torment himself to such a state. Looking at the man's thin and tired face, her eyes were full of tears. 2 streams of tears stuck to his tired face, dripping onto the ground with a pitter-patter. Damn it, she heard the sound. Ahem, brother. Shen Yueji didn't know how to face him. She covered her mouth and coughed awkwardly. She pulled Shuangxi behind her and said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and help brother in." Oh. Shuangxi came to her senses and went forward to help him. Shen Yueji slapped her away. "I want you to help me." Shen Yueji had no choice but to go forward to help him. She happened to see her 2 red and swollen claws. Immediately, Shen Yueji finally calmed herself down and stopped crying with great difficulty. Patter, 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 patter. It kept rolling down. Like unstoppable raindrops, drop after drop, the ground was soon drenched. Sob, sob, sob. I told you not to enter the palace, but you insisted. You've only been in the palace for a short time, and you've been hurt by the little bitches in the harem. Sob, sob, sob. Jeer, let's elope. At most, we'll make the emperor angry and let him kill the whole Shen family. Let's wander the world and abandon our parents. Sob, sob. Shen Yueji was speechless. What nonsense are you talking about? Before you entered the palace, didn't father and mother tell you not to talk nonsense in the palace? It wasn't easy for me to get His Majesty to agree to let me see you. If you talk nonsense again, I'll have double happiness drive you out. She didn't know which of her words had scared Shen Yueji. In an instant, the man rushed into Feng Qi Palace like a tornado. He was deeply afraid that if he was a step late, he would really be driven out by her. Shen Yueji blushed with shame and silently followed him into the hall. Isn't it just entering the palace? It's not like we'll never see each other again. Do you have to torture yourself to this extent? I heard from Double Happiness that you haven't eaten or drunk anything for more than a month. Shen Yueji sniffled, looking indescribably aggrieved. I drank it. Every 7 days, when father and mother were worried that I was going to starve to death, they would order someone to press me down and force something into my mouth. Look. He pointed at his lips. I've lost weight everywhere else. Only here is fat. Shen Yueji, looking at his red and swollen mouth, it was almost as swollen as her hand. What happened to your hand? Who did it? I'll help you destroy it. Chapter 36. Didn't I tell you? In this harem, everyone knows that our Shen family is important in Feng country. Who dares to harm me? Shen Yueji took back her hand. Don't worry about me. I did it myself. It will be fine in a few days. It doesn't hurt, but it's a little ugly. You did it yourself? Shen Yueji blinked. You don't believe me? I believe you. Shen Yueji continued to be aggrieved. Sister, I'm hungry. Shen Yueji wanted to slap him. Now you know that you're hungry? Why didn't you eat when you were in the manor? She was annoyed at him for degrading her body. After venting for a while, she said, before you came, I had asked Double Happiness to prepare in the imperial kitchen. The food will be here soon. I don't have an appetite if I don't see you. I always feel like throwing up. Brother. What? Don't tell me you're pregnant? Seeing that the man was about to cry again, Shun Yueji quickly waved her hand. Okay, okay, okay. I won't say it. Don't cry. You eat and drink well in the palace. I stay at home and lock myself in my room. I miss you every day. I'm afraid that you will be bullied and ignored by the emperor. You have never suffered since you were young. Other than me bullying you, you are a pure white lotus. You don't understand the dangers of the world. Shun Yuechi pulled her sleeve and wiped his dirty face. He wiped his tears and snot on her body. Shin Yueji looked at him in disgust. She didn't dare to move. He was afraid that she would move. He even wiped his saliva on her body. After he cried for a while, it turned into sobs. Shin Yueji felt sorry for him. She took a handkerchief and put it on his dirty face. When a white lotus grows up, it can also become a black lotus. How old am I? How can I not distinguish between good and bad? Don't worry. I know how to protect myself. Hey, why are you crying? Shin Yueji was anxious. Jier, since you left, I'm the only one at home. It's so cold. No one goes out with me to make trouble. I have nothing. I'm so pitiful. Father and mother still mistreated me. Sob. I might not be their biological child. Sob, sob, sob. Shin Yueji speechlessly pulled the man into her arms and comforted him. All right, cry if you feel wronged. When you're done venting, wash your messy hair and your clothes. I wonder how the soldiers guarding the imperial city let you in. Shun Yuechi snuggled in her arms and sobbed. I cried like a bear. When they saw me like this, they knew who I was. Who dared to stop me? I'll get someone to fetch water for you to bathe. Change your clothes first, or else you're not allowed to eat. Give me some. I'll soak it in the water. She continued to sob. Shin Yueji ordered someone to fetch some water. There were no men's clothes in the perching phoenix palace, so Shin Yueji could only ask the little eunuch who fetched the water to take off his clothes. Only then did Shan Yuechi have clothes to wear. After sending the man away, she sat alone on the chaise longue and tidied up her clothes that had been messed up by the man. Your ladyship, this servant has returned. Shuangshi's wheezing voice came from outside the hall. Shin Yueji sat upright, pinched a piece of pastry into her mouth, and chewed slowly. You've been gone for so long. I'm still a little worried. I'm going to send someone to the imperial kitchen to have a look. Chapter 37. He got into a fight. That damned little slut. When she saw this servant carrying something, she deliberately tripped this servant. I was in a hurry and didn't look where I was going. The noodles I made for young master, his favorite, were all spilled on the ground. Double Happiness ordered the little eunuch to bring in the food. More than a dozen plates of food filled the table. After they were set, Double Happiness waved her hand to let them go. Your Highness, where is young master? He went to take a bath. Tell me, who tripped you? I haven't been in the palace for long. The servants in the palace know that you are from the Phoenix Perch Palace just by looking at your clothes. Who has the guts to trip you? If it was someone else, of course they wouldn't have the guts. Your Highness, that Ju Yin is the maid of Zhangsun Wuyue, the daughter of Zhangsun Wuqi, the minister of the Ministry of Rights? Yes, Your Highness, it's her. That little bitch pushed you into the water that day. I didn't expect that she would also come to the palace. Although I didn't see Zhangsun Wuyue, that little girl Ju Yan's arrogance is exactly the same as that of her family's miss. Double Happiness cursed angrily. Shin Yueji understood. It turned out that her master was pushed into the water by the daughter of the Zhangsun family. She was so focused on entering the palace that she forgot to ask about this. She couldn't help but smile. You've always been unwilling to suffer losses. The status of the Zhangsun family is much lower than that of our Shun family. How did you repay her? I slapped her more than a dozen times, making her lie on the ground and unable to get up. I also kicked her more than a dozen times. Not only that, I also picked up the dusty noodles on the ground and put them all on her head to make a new hairstyle for her. Your Highness, you were afraid of the daughter of the Zhangsun family because she could help you come up with a plan to attract the regent's attention. However, none of the ideas she came up with were not good, Some of the memories of the original owner were fragmented, and Shin Yueji more or less knew some. For example, Zhang Sun Wuyue was getting closer and closer to the original owner because of the regent. The original owner had fallen in love with Imo Wushang and had gone crazy. Zhang Sun Wuyue had taken advantage of this opportunity to give the original owner countless rotten ideas. This had implicated the entire general residence and caused them to lose face because of the original owner. The original owner was indeed afraid of Zhang Sun Wuyue, afraid of offending her, afraid that she would no longer give her advice. She was afraid that she would never be able to obtain Imo Wushang's favor in this lifetime. What are you testing me for? Are you testing me to see if I'm still the same as before? If that Zhang Sun Wuyue comes looking for you, will I let her find trouble with you and ignore her? Shuang, she felt wronged. Your Highness, when we were in the mansion before, that Zhang Sun Wuyue always found trouble with me. Although your Highness is on my side and every time something happens, you let me hide and not show my face. But this time in the palace, if she comes looking for trouble with me again, don't worry, I will protect you. It was her maid who bullied you first, and you were defending yourself. Even if the villain complained first, there is no need to be so shameless. Your Highness, have you finally thought it through? You want to shed all pretense of cordiality with the daughter of the Zhang Sun family? Zhang Sun Wuyue suddenly approached me for no reason. Afterwards, when I provoked the Prince Regent's disdain, she went to the Prince Regent and put in a good word for me. Double happiness. Do you think this Zhang Sun Wuyue is interested in the Prince Regent? Chapter 38. I have long seen that no one in Zhang Sun Wuqi's family is a good person. They are all pretentious and shameless. But if she is really interested in the regent, why does she come to the palace? That's simple. Zhang Sun Wuyue's mother is just a little concubine. Because Zhang Sun Wuyue is smart and beautiful, she is deeply loved by Zhang Sun Wuqi. When she was 10 years old, he raised her to be his legitimate daughter. He wanted to send her to the palace in the future. He originally intended to give her to the old emperor, but who knew that the old emperor suddenly passed away, so she picked up a good chance to serve the new emperor. In my opinion, this little bitch has a good life. That's right. The daughters of the powerful families are sent to the palace to make profits for the family. Shin Yueji wiped her hands. Her red and swollen hands gradually calmed down. At least they didn't look so ugly. You go to help the eldest brother with his hair and clothes. It's time to eat. Yes, Your Highness. Remember, don't tell the eldest brother about this. Otherwise, with his temper, I don't know how much trouble he will make. Your Highness, rest assured, I understand. Shin Yueji dressed neatly and came out of the side hall. The eunuch uniform couldn't hide the noble spirit exuding from his body. He had a fair face, handsome facial features, a pair of thick eyebrows, eyes full of spirit, and a delicate face. After changing her clothes and freshening up, it was as if her brother, who had amazed her at first glance, had returned. She smiled and motioned him to sit down. Eldest brother, sit down. Looking at the table full of dishes, Shin Yueji's appetite was greatly increased. Sister knows me well, unlike father and mother who don't know what I like to eat. Shin Yueji blushed. Eldest brother, don't you just want to eat meat? How could this be considered understanding? She had to prepare delicious food and drinks for him every few days. He didn't expect that in Shin Yueji's heart, it was love for him. She picked up a chicken leg and gave it to him. Eldest brother, after going back today, remember not to fool around anymore. If your body continues to be like this, if you really have any disease, what will father and mother do? Don't worry, your brother's body is still strong. At least until I see you live a happy life, nothing will happen to your brother. Hearing this, Shin Yueji's nose turned sour. In this world, who doesn't think about themselves? Big brother, don't just think about me. I'm already an adult, and I know how to take care of myself. You have to think about yourself. How old are you? It's time for you to get married and have children. Do you dislike me? She didn't know which words had made him unhappy, but he put down his chopsticks. Shin Yueji said anxiously, I was just saying, I didn't mean anything by it. Don't get agitated, big brother. Little sister, your Phoenix Perch Palace is pretty big. Why don't you make some space for me? I won't leave. I'll stay in the palace with you. If the dog emperor dares to bully you, I'll chop him up. If father heard what you said, he would lock you up in your room and forbid you from coming out for half a month. Shun Yueji couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Are you trying to ruin your sister's reputation? I'll kill whoever dares to speak ill of you. Shun Yueji glared at her. Shin Yueji stuffed a chicken leg into his mouth. Eating can't stop your mouth. It's getting late. Finish eating and go back quickly. Chapter 39. When Shun Yueji heard this, he was instantly unhappy. Even if you are my biological brother, this is still the harem. The emperor has already given in and allowed you to visit the palace. If you don't know what's good for you and stay here, it is clear that you want people to gossip and ruin our Shin family's reputation. Shun Yueji snorted indifferently. Does our Shin family still have a reputation? It doesn't matter if it is ruined. Since Big Brother is so considerate of me, why don't you help me investigate someone after we leave the palace? Shin Yueji lowered her brows and lightly picked at the food in her bowl as she casually said. When he heard that she was asking for his help, Shin Yueji's eyes immediately lit up. What do you mean help or not? With our relationship, just say it. As long as Jier says it, even if it is a knife or a sea of fire, Big Brother will not even blink. I will do it for you. It is not a knife or a sea of fire. Shin Yueji smiled and picked up another piece of meat for him. Shun Yueji wolfed it down into his mouth. Does Big Brother know the 7th-rank county magistrate of Zhongzhou, Darrenly? Li Yao? Shin Yueji frowned. Zhongzhou Li Yao? How can a person of my level know him? But I have heard of him. Why? Did he offend you? Li Yao has 3 daughters born of a concubine named Liang Ying. Seeing Shin Yueji's expression change for a moment, Shin Yueji continued, although I have not seen her, but I heard many people say that the 3 daughters of the 7th-rank county magistrate Li Yao are very similar to the late empress. Their expressions and mannerisms are at least 70% similar. As a result, Li Yao's name is known to me because of his 3 daughters, which are widely spread in Zhongzhou. Shin Yueji put down his bowl and chopsticks. Jier, what are you planning? I want Big Brother to talk to Darrenly and send Miss Li into the palace. In the future, I will take care of her in the palace. Second Brother only needs to tell Darrenly that he only needs to send the 3 daughters in, and I guarantee that he will have a meteoric rise in the imperial court. Jier, are you suspecting that the emperor has feelings for the late empress? Shun Yueji was a smart person. Shin Yueji wasn't surprised that he could guess this. She did not deny it. Liang Ying's treatment in the Fu is not good. Her mother is a maid, and she has a docile personality. She has always been bullied by her D sisters. Entering the palace is a good thing for her. It's a good thing for me. I believe in your judgment, but you have to think carefully. What kind of place is the harem? Once a person has the opportunity to climb to a higher place, she will have the right to make her own decisions. Jier, do you think that she will still remember the kindness you gave her in the past? Shun Yueji glanced at her. You chose to enter the palace yourself, but you found someone else to be favored on your behalf. Jier, I don't understand what you're trying to do. Shin Yueji smiled faintly. As Big Brother said, before Big Brother came, the regent entered the palace. I thought I had let go of my feelings for the regent, but after he entered the palace, I found that I still like him in my heart. Then I will go back and tell father. Let him see the emperor and let you out of the palace. Seeing that he was really about to get up and walk out, Big Brother, Shin Yueji stopped him. Is the harem a place where I can enter and leave whenever I want? Even if father has made countless contributions to the phone country, the emperor will not allow him to be presumptuous a 3rd time. She sat down and placed her red and swollen hand on the table. If Big Brother is not willing, then go back. Pretend I never said these words. Chapter 40. Shin Yueji glared at her. You have to give me a reason. You are my younger sister. You have father and mother behind you. The entire Shin family is supporting you. What if you do something too risky and don't discuss it with us? What if you hurt yourself? There is nothing to discuss. It is just a woman who looks like the late empress to win favor from the empress. If it is really like what Big Brother said, one day she climbs to a high position and forgets my help, I have the ability to send her to the palace and also the ability to get rid of her. Hearing this, Shun Yueqi no longer said anything. Well, since you have said it like this. He took out a small brocade box from his bosom and pushed it in front of her. Shin Yueji glanced at it. What is this? Corpse insect pill. I learned it from others. Originally, I had other uses for it. But now it seems that you need it more than me. When I go to Zhengzhou, I will personally feed it to Li Yingying. Once she is not loyal to you, the corpse insect pill will produce countless insects in her body until her flesh and blood are swallowed until there is only powder left. This is the antidote. You eat it. Every month, you will use a drop of your blood to detoxify her. From now on, she will be your puppet. Whatever you want her to do, she will do it. She will never dare to be disloyal. Give me the corpse insect pill. What? Shin Yueji's face became serious. I have my own decision. Big brother only needs to send her to the palace. I have arrangements for the rest. Shen Yueqi reluctantly took out a brocade box from his bosom. After all this time, you begged the emperor to let me into the palace, not because you miss me. It turns out that you have other plans. Indeed, I have other plans. From childhood to adulthood, have I not gained much from you, big brother? Facing her matter-of-factly, Shun Yueqi gritted his teeth. I don't care what you have in mind. Even if I am not in the palace, I will let people pay attention to every move in the palace. Once I find that this Li Yingying has bad intentions, I will find someone to kill her sooner or later. What spies did father arrange in the palace? Hearing this, Shun Yueqi suddenly moved closer to her with a mysterious expression. Gao Dazhong, His Majesty's favorite, has now been bought over by us. If Ji has any urgent matters in the future, you can directly send him over. Gao Dazhong? Shin Yueji was shocked. She had long known that there were spies of the Shun family in the palace, but she did not think that it was Gao Dazhong. Gao Dazhong's loyalty to Feng Jiaqing was something that even the Gu family couldn't do anything about. Seeing the shock on her face, Shun Yueqi smiled proudly. You didn't expect this, did you? Otherwise, how did father know that the Empress's face was full of rashes and that she was going to cause trouble for you? It's all because of Gao Dazhong. Shun Yueqi found it hard to digest the information Shun Yueqi gave her. After a while, she said, I understand. No wonder Gao Dazhong was so nervous every time she mentioned the late Empress to Feng Jiaqing. He was worried about her. Shin Yueqi shamelessly stayed in Feng Qi Palace for a long time before she reluctantly left. Before leaving, she hugged Double Happiness's head and cried bitterly. Double Happiness's face was green and red from being strangled. In the end, Shin Yueji could not stand it anymore and reluctantly separated the two of them. Your ladyship, eldest young master, is so enthusiastic. This servant was almost strangled to death by him. After Shun Yueqi left, Double Happiness plunged into her arms and wailed loudly. Don't be in a hurry to cry. Go and hide the things that eldest brother gave me. There should be a distinguished guest coming later. Chapter 41. It was already 5 in the afternoon when Zhangsun Wuyue came. Shin Yueji was lying on the beauty chair with her eyes closed. She listened to the voice coming from outside the hall. She opened her eyes slightly and curled her lips. Please come in. The woman was wearing a pink dress, and her hair was as smooth as silk, straight to the back of her head. Her figure was petite and exquisite, and her face was delicate and refined, beautiful and moving, especially her eyes, which were bright like light, as if they were inlaid with a shining pearl. Zhangsun Wuyue, this woman, was not a stranger to Shun Yueji. She looked at her quietly. The woman also raised her head, neither servile nor overbearing, and her eyes flashed with disdain. Seeing this, the curve of her lips could not help but deepen. Imperial concubine really deserves to be the eldest daughter of the Shin family. Since childhood, she has been protected by the Shin family. When she bumped into something, General Shin felt distressed and blamed himself. I didn't expect that after entering the palace, her status is second only to the Empress. Imperial concubine Moon is also good. You just entered the palace, and didn't you also get a second-grade Imperial concubine? I heard that you have been in the palace for some time. Why did you suddenly come today? Zhangsun Wuyue's face was not good. Shouldn't Imperial concubine know best that I come to this Phoenix Palace? You. As she was speaking, She saw Shin Yueji raise her hand. She was puzzled. Imperial concubine, what do you mean? In front of me, Imperial concubine Moon can call herself this Imperial concubine. I don't know. Since when is the second-grade Imperial concubine above Imperial concubine? Zhang Sun Wuyue's face suddenly turned pale. Shin Yueji continued to laugh. Sister Yu, don't you know the rules? You come to my Phoenix Palace and don't know how to salute when you see me. Is Lord Zhangsuan's daughter so ignorant of etiquette? Do you need me to inform my father and let him tell Lord Zhangsun on my behalf? You, who don't know the rules, a concubine's daughter? Shin Yueji, how dare you? Shuang Shi angrily rebuked. Imperial concubine Moon doesn't know the rules. How dare you shout at my Imperial concubine? Do you want to die? Don't think that I don't know why you entered the palace. Zhangsun Wuyue didn't pay any attention to Shuang Shi's angry rebuke. She glared at Shin Yueji with her almond-shaped eyes. Do you think the regent will like you like this? Shin Yueji leisurely tidied up the stray hair on her temples. Why don't I see the little girl Ju Yin beside little sister Moon? You still have the cheek to say that. Shin Yueji's expression turned cold. Imperial concubine Moon, if you dare disrespect this concubine again, don't blame this concubine for being impolite. Zhangsun Wuyue's face was ashen. Seeing that she really had signs of anger, he subconsciously clenched his fists. She then revealed a smile. Look, Imperial concubine Jiejia is being serious again. This concubine is just joking with you. You're still the same as before, taking a few jokes seriously. Shin Yueji faintly raised her eyelids. That's natural. After all, I'm a narrow-minded person. Since little sister Imperial concubine Moon isn't here to cause trouble, then double happiness. Find a seat for her. Imperial concubine Moon, please. Shuang Shi's expression was unkind. Zhangsun Wuyue pretended not to see it. She walked to the side of the tea table and sat down on a round chair. Chapter 42. Imperial sister, you and I used to be sisters. Now that we are in the palace, we should take care of each other. Ju Yin is my trusted maid, and we grew up together. We have a deep relationship. You need to give me an explanation, right? Shin Yueji lightly took a sip of tea. Today, Big Brother entered the palace. Ben Gong ordered Shuang Shi to go to the imperial kitchen to prepare more food. I don't know which lowly maid was so blind as to purposely trip Shuang Shi. Later, Shuang Shi came back and mentioned this matter to Ben Gong. Only then did Ben Gong know that it was Ju Yin who served consort Yu. But according to what Imperial Sister said, Shin Yueji put down the teacup and paused. She probably didn't know what Ju Yin did. As the saying goes, the ignorant are innocent. I didn't find trouble with Imperial Sister because we used to be sisters. I didn't expect Imperial Sister to come to me. If you insist on asking for an explanation, why don't we report it to the Emperor and let him decide? Let's see who is at fault. The Shin family had made great contributions to the Feng country. It could be said that they were on par with the Gu family. Just from the fact that Shen Yueji was conferred the title of Imperial Sister, Zhangsun Wuyue could see how much the Emperor valued the Shin family. Such a trivial matter, if it really reached the ears of the Emperor. Shen Yueji was born in a family of generals. She didn't care about trifles and didn't know how to read people. She was the eldest daughter of Zhangsun Wuqi, a minister of the Ministry of Rites. She had been well-mannered since she was a child. Zhangsun Wuyue's beautiful little face alternated between green and white, but after a while, she revealed a smile again, trying to curry favor. What is Imperial concubine Jiejie saying? Younger sister was just casually mentioning it. With our relationship, how could we make things difficult for His Majesty? Shin Yueji was unmoved. She looked indifferent. What do you mean by unmoved? It is the Emperor who will side with me. Zhangsun Wuyue secretly gritted her teeth. Sister is right. I heard that the Empress has a rash on her face. It was you who went to treat the Empress. Shin Yueji glanced at her. Is there a problem? Of course there is no problem. Zhangsun Wuyue sneered. I just pity the Prince Regent. In the face of her meaningful words, Shin Yueji picked up the teacup again, put it to her lips, and blew gently. The Regent has a high position and is superior to others. What's there to be pitiful about? I heard that ever since Sister Imperial Concubine entered the palace, the Prince Regent has entered the palace more often than before. And before I came here, I heard that the Prince Regent came to Phoenix Palace today. And then? Zhang Sun Wuyue looked around vigilantly. Knowing her intentions, Shun Yueji only smiled and said nothing. Zhang Sun Wuyue looked a little embarrassed and said bluntly, in my heart, I think that the Prince Regent still has some feelings for Sister Imperial Concubine. Bang! The teacup smashed heavily onto the coffee table. With a loud noise, the warm tea splashed all over the floor. Zhang Sun Wuyue was startled and quickly stood up, bowing in salute. I don't know where younger sister said something wrong to provoke Imperial Consort Nyang Yang to be so angry. Shin Yueji smiled. Imperial Concubine you. Do you think that I am still the same as before, fooled and used by you? She stood up and walked towards Ji Yunshu step by step from the high ground. Chapter 43. It was obviously just a light sentence, but for some reason, especially seeing her approaching step by step, Zhang Sun Wuyue subconsciously felt flustered. I don't understand what Imperial Consort means. South Lake in the southern suburbs. Whether I was accidentally pushed down by you or deliberately pushed down, Imperial Consort you, no one knows better than you. Zhang Sun Wuyue knelt on the ground in fright. Is Imperial Consort you suspecting younger sister? I and you are like sisters. Before entering the palace, I knew your feelings for the Prince Regent, and I gave you advice everywhere. At that time, there were many onlookers at South Lake. The former Empress was drowned in South Lake, and it could be said that it was crowded everywhere. I didn't know that I was bumped into and accidentally pushed you into the lake. I was worried that this matter would make you estranged from me, so I always wanted to find an opportunity to explain it to you. But before I could step into the Shun family's door, your brother he, speaking of this, Zhang Sun Wuyue's tears fell. If it wasn't for father's arrival, I'm afraid I would have drowned in South Lake like the former Empress. You drowned in South Lake. You only have yourself to blame. You can't blame others. You, Imperial Consort you, everything I did was for you. Why do you say that to me? Whether it was for me or for yourself, Zhang Sun Wuyue, you know very well. I'll say the ugly words first. Before entering the palace, I was stupid and believed your instigation. Now, since you've entered the palace with me, you pushed me into the water, and eldest brother threw you into the lake for 6 hours. The matter between us is considered even. From now on, you and I mind our own business. If you want to use me again to achieve your goal, believe it or not, I have 100 ways to deal with you. Zhang Sun Wuyue's face turned completely white. He forced a smile and said, Yu Ji, what are you talking about? I don't understand at all. We have such a good relationship, and we are inseparable no matter where we go. Why would I harm you? Did you listen to someone's instigation? In the future, when we are in the palace, we still have to look after each other. If we shed all pretense of cordiality, I'm afraid the person behind us will be proud. She stepped forward to hold Shun Yueji's hand. Shin Yueji smiled faintly, dodged her hand, and slapped her across the face. Zhang Sun Wuyue was completely dumbfounded. He covered his beaten face and didn't react for a long time. Shin Yueji took the handkerchief Double Happiness handed her and wiped her hands. Her lips curved up in a smile. Imperial Concubine Moon, do you not understand human language? Or do you really think of yourself as a thing? Do you think this Empress needs your care? This slap is a lesson for you. Double Happiness, see our guests out. Imperial Concubine Moon, since my Imperial Concubine doesn't want you to stay, then don't be so ungrateful. Hurry up and leave. Zhang Sun Wuyue clenched his fists under his long sleeves, and a fierce light flashed through his misty eyes. She stared hatefully at Shen Yueji. Even if your Shun family's power is greater in Jing City, the favored one is the Gu family and the favored concubine of the new emperor is the Empress. Do you really think that you can gain a foothold in the harem alone? Chapter 44. Shin Yueji turned back to look at her. Will a person who is stupid once be stupid a second time? Zhang Sun Wuyue, you are smart, but too smart. My status is above you. How can my Shin family be compared to your small Zhang Sun family? Cooperate with you? She smiled. Deal with the Gu family together. or seduce the emperor together? Or, what benefits will there be for me after the matter is done? You don't have to pay anything. Just basking in my light. I don't know how many benefits you can get. The smile at the corner of her mouth disappeared, and the expression on her face gradually became cold. I hate selfish, petty people like you the most. Take advantage of the fact that I'm not very angry right now, and quickly scram. If you're a step late, I can only order people to drag you out. Imperial concubine you. Colluding with the imperial concubine to frame the empress and seduce the emperor is a big crime. Facing Xin Yueji's falling out, Zhang Sun Wuyue's heart, in addition to disbelief, also had a deep fear. When did the brainless eldest young miss of the general's residence, who could be ordered around like a fool in the past, become so wise? In just a few words, he had exposed all the thoughts that she had carefully calculated in her heart. She swallowed her saliva, endured the anger in her eyes, and bowed. This concubine will withdraw. Manage the dog servant around you. If he dares to recklessly bump into the people around Bingong again, next time, it will not be as simple as going back alive. Imperial concubine, don't bully people too much. Xin Yueji smiled slightly. Bully you? What can you do? Zhang Sun Wuyue clenched her teeth. Yes, bully her. What can she do? She was just Zhang Sun Wuqi's concubine daughter. Because she was clever and beautiful, and because she was eloquent, she was deeply liked by him, so she was promoted to be the D-wife. The purpose was to train her well and send her to the palace to benefit the family in the future. She always knew. She got close to Shen Yueji, this stupid woman, because she didn't want to enter the palace and marry the old emperor. As long as the regent liked her, she could be the hostess of the regent's residence. From then on, who dared to look down on her? Who dared to bully her? Later on, the late emperor passed away and the new emperor ascended the throne. He was a handsome and resourceful young emperor. She no longer resisted entering the palace. If she could gain the favor of such a gentle and handsome man, it would not be a bad thing for her. She knew that Xin Yueji had entered the palace for some reason. In the days she had been in the palace, she had been secretly observing Feng Qi Palace's every move. She heard that Xin Yueji had cured the rash on Gu Yuan's face, and the emperor had personally escorted her back to the palace, even letting her ride in the imperial carriage. She had always been disdainful of her, but because of this, she came again. But Zhang Sun Wuyue didn't think that the Shen Yueji of today and the Shen Yueji of the past were two completely different people. She had once fawned over him in every possible way, but now she was just like those people, looking down on him, humiliating her. Zhang Sun Wuyue clenched his teeth and left Phoenix Perch Palace without saying a word. Your Highness, aren't you afraid that she'll take revenge on you in the future if you fall out with her like this? Shuangshi didn't ignore the resentful expression on Zhang Sun Wuyue's face when he left. She looked at Shen Yueji with a worried face and shrugged lightly. She's just a grass on the wall. It's useless to keep such a disloyal person by my side. Chapter 45. Although the power of the Zhangsun family is not as good as our Shen family, apart from the Shin family and the Gu family, the Zhangsun family is also one of them. Shin Yueji said disapprovingly, I am afraid that she will not join the Empress's camp. Since she can use me, she naturally wants to use the Empress, who says that if Bin Gong accepts her, she will not continue to join the Empress's camp. She couldn't help flicking her head. Do you know what is a fence-sitter? Nyang Nyang, you are poking me again. My brain is almost poked out by you. Shin Yueji was shocked when she heard the words. After a long while, she said, Don't be so disgusting, okay? But it is the first time that Nyang Nyang has fallen out with Zhang Sun Wuyue. When this servant saw that she left, her little face turned blue. I don't know how funny it is. She still thinks she's clever enough to think that she can still use your highness like before. What time is it? Replying to Nyang Nyang, the sun has gone down. It should be the hour of the clock. The hour of the clock? Shin Yueji frowned. It has been some time since the regent went to the imperial study. It has been about 4 hours. Nyang Nyang, the emperor said that he will come to see you after finishing his official business. You see, the emperor has not come yet. Did he go to the empress's palace? Shin Yueji shook her head. If the regent did not enter the palace today, and he did not come to see Bin Gong at this time. Maybe he really went to Xianghe Palace. But, keeping her in suspense, Shen Yueji smiled faintly. According to the regent's character, he must have angered the emperor. That's right. Shuangshi nodded in agreement. In the whole world, only the regent dares not to put the emperor in his eyes. It is true that the emperor can't do anything to the regent. Nyang, let's sleep first? Resisting the urge to flick her head again, Shen Yueji glared at her. All day long. You only know how to eat and sleep, and eat when you wake up. Set out, Bin Gong is going to the imperial study. What? Nyang, you can't. Shuangshi was shocked. The imperial study is the place where the emperor deals with state affairs. The concubines cannot interfere in politics. If Nyang goes, the emperor will not be happy. Who said that I'm going to meddle in politics? His Majesty must be tired after dealing with state affairs for so long. Bin Gong is cooking something for him. Shuangshi's disgusted gaze fell on her pair of red and swollen hands. Your ladyship, can the food you make with your current hands be edible? Shen Yueji waved her hand. Shuangshi was shocked and quickly shut up. Go to the imperial kitchen and tell them to make some candied date porridge. Oh, Shen Yueji looked at her. 3 spoonfuls of white rice and 2 ounces of red beans. Don't add any more sugar. Go with some vegetarian dishes. Empress, isn't this too cheap? If you want to see His Majesty, shouldn't you cook some white fungus and lotus seed porridge? Why do I need to cook white fungus and lotus seed porridge? Haven't the older sisters in the back palace given me a lot of this porridge? But isn't candied date porridge a little too greasy in comparison? Moreover, this servant helped your ladyship ask around during these days in the palace. His Majesty doesn't seem to like sweet things. Gently twirling a small tuft of hair behind her ear, Shen Yueji smiled slightly. There is no sugar. How can it be greasy? Don't worry, His Majesty will like it. Shuangshi was dubious. It was just a bowl of porridge, and His Majesty would not say anything. She responded and left. It was already nighttime at the hour of 5. Shen Yueji waited for Shuangshi to come back. When she arrived at the imperial study in the carriage, there was only the dimness of the moonlight. Chapter 46. Gao Dazhong saw her from a distance outside the hall. He walked quickly towards her. Greetings, imperial concubine. Shen Yueji got down from the carriage with double happiness's help. She glanced at the person that Shen Yueji mentioned. Eunuch Gao, His Majesty is busy with official affairs. It's already late at night since I left Fengqi Palace, and he hasn't rested. I feel sorry for His Majesty, so I specially ordered the servants of the imperial kitchen to make some porridge for His Majesty and some side dishes. Gao Dazhong hesitated and said worriedly, the regent came today and His Majesty is not in a good mood. Imperial concubine, you should go back first. If you offend His Majesty at this time, I'm afraid it won't be good. Shen Yueji shrugged. His Majesty has to eat something if he is in a bad mood. No matter how strong His Majesty is, he is still a mortal. He is so tired from handling official affairs every day. If he doesn't eat something, how can his body bear it? The Empress is accompanying His Majesty inside. Before the Empress came, she also sent food to His Majesty. Imperial concubine, you don't have to worry. Shen Yueji stood there, motionless, and didn't answer. Gao Dazhong lowered his head and waited for a long time. Finally, he carefully raised his head and gestured to her with his lips. Your Highness, you should reprimand this servant in a low voice. Otherwise, this servant will not be able to let you in. Shen Yueji smiled slightly and imitated him, whispering, Eunuch Gao is a favorite of His Majesty. I dare not reprimand you. Cough. She reached out to cover her mouth and coughed softly. Eunuch Gao, please go in and inform His Majesty that I have cooked candied date porridge with some light side dishes. Candied date porridge? Gao Dazhong seemed to be surprised, but he quickly covered it and bowed respectfully. Yes, Imperial concubine, I will go in and inform His Majesty. His Majesty, I made this white fungus and lotus seed porridge for you. You have been dealing with official affairs for a moment. Although national affairs are important, you should also take care of your body. In the imperial study, Gu Yuan wore a glazed dress. She looked less graceful and more elegant. She stood beside the man and grinded the ink for him. Her exquisite and graceful figure was slender and charming. Her beautiful face was covered by a veil, giving her a mysterious sense of beauty. Her soft voice was like the clear sky after the rain. After Shin Yueji came in, she heard Gu Yuan's soft and heart-wrenching voice. It was so soft that it could melt a person's heart. The man sat upright on the dragon throne, his handsome and gentle brows furrowed. It was obvious that he was troubled by a lot of things. "This concubine greets your majesty, big sister empress." She bowed politely. Feng Juqing's gaze fell on her, and he stared at her for a while. "Didn't I tell you to stay in the perching phoenix palace to recuperate? Is your hand feeling better now?" Shin Yueji smiled faintly and took the food box from Shuangshi's hands. "The redness has gone down a bit. I heard that after your majesty left this Chie's place, you haven't eaten anything." This Chie was very worried and specially ordered the servants of the imperial kitchen to cook some candied date porridge for your majesty. "I also added some vegetables so that your majesty won't feel sick of eating it." The 3 words, candied date porridge, shocked Feng Juqing. When he heard that she asked to see him, he wanted Gao Dazhong to refuse. Later, when he heard Gao Dazhong said that she cooked candied date porridge, he subconsciously let her in. There was a touch of complexity in his clear eyes. "Come here." Chapter 47. Feng Juqing's eyes were locked on the exquisite dishes in front of him. He was lost in thought for a long time. He was used to eating the food she made. He didn't like sweet food, so she cooked porridge for him with some salty side dishes. She was afraid that he would get tired of it. His big hands under the dragon robe were cold. That beautiful pale face seemed to appear in front of him again. Feng Juqing's handsome eyebrows were gradually covered with haze. His tired face was filled with killing intent, and even his usually gentle eyes were bloodshot. "Imperial concubine, His Majesty doesn't like sweet food. My concubine never adds sugar to His Majesty's food, let alone this sweet candied date. Even if you love His Majesty, you shouldn't violate this taboo. You don't even know His Majesty's preferences." Yushio smiled proudly. She put the food box on the dragon table and opened it for her to see. "This white fungus and lotus seed porridge is what His Majesty should eat. His Majesty is the ruler of a country. How can he eat the food made by Imperial concubine?" "Yushio, don't be rude to Imperial concubine," Gu Yuan scolded. Yushio was scared and quickly closed her mouth. "Imperial concubine, please don't be angry. I was just reminding Imperial concubine about His Majesty's preferences." Shun Yueji didn't respond. She took out the candied date porridge from the food box and put it in front of the man. "Your Majesty, this candied date porridge is something this subject's concubine often ate when I was young, paired with a few side dishes, although the taste can't compare to the exotic delicacies that Your Majesty is used to. This unique taste has its own special flavor. Your Majesty should try it first and see if this subject's concubine is right." Feng Juqing took a pair of red and swollen hands in front of him. Does Imperial concubine also have such a habit? Hearing this, Shin Yueji blinked and looked at the young emperor with some confusion. "Habit? What habit?" "Nothing." Feng Juqing took the soup spoon that she handed to him and looked at the familiar combination. 9 dates meant a long time. She wanted to be husband and wife with him forever. There were also many other meanings that he had forgotten as time passed. Perhaps he had never listened to her words seriously, or even remembered them in his heart. He ate a candied date, and the sweet taste made the emperor frown. Seeing this, Shin Yueji hurriedly took out the side dishes from the food box and gave them to him. The man picked up a piece of vegetable and put it into his mouth, his furrowed brows slowly relaxing. Gu Yuan's face twisted under the veil. How is this possible? She personally made the white fungus and lotus seed porridge for the emperor. Before that, the emperor had always praised her exquisite cooking skills. How could it be defeated by Shan Yueji's insignificant candied date porridge? Moreover, it was the sweets that the emperor hated the most. "Your Majesty, she said unwillingly. Feng Juqing looked up at her. "Gao Dazhong, send the empress back to Shangha Palace." "Your Majesty, Immerse's face is still injured. The imperial physician said that she shouldn't be exposed to the wind. How could she have forgotten about this?" Feng Juqing said to her patiently, "In the future, you can just leave such matters to the servants. There is no need to do it yourself." Gu Yuan's pale smile became forced. "Your Majesty is right." Chun Xie had forgotten this point. Chapter 48. His Majesty likes Sister Empress so much that he doesn't want her to get sick and cook for him personally. His Majesty loves Sister. Gu Yuan smiled lightly. Sister Imperial Concubine is right. His Majesty has always treated me like this. I don't know when the rash on my face will disappear. I'm afraid that Sister Imperial Concubine will have to take care of His Majesty in the next few days. Oh, there's one more thing. Gu Yuan dragged out the word. I forgot to ask Sister Imperial Concubine. After applying Yulu ointment, there is a burst of pain on my face, as if someone is pulling the skin off my face. Is it a normal reaction? Xin Yueji stopped smiling. It's normal. Seeing something flashing in Gu Yuan's eyes, Xin Yueji smiled. The rash on Sister's face has been passed on to me. If the rash on Sister's face doesn't disappear, Sister's hands won't recover. So, even if there is something wrong, I will also suffer. Sister Imperial Concubine, don't worry. The little face under the veil changed. Gu Yuan smiled faintly. I feel guilty for implicating Sister. I will personally visit and thank you another day. Your Majesty, I will go back first. Okay, later. Will Your Majesty go to my place again? I have prepared a table of dinner for Your Majesty. The Emperor chuckled. If I can finish reading the memorials tonight, I will go. If it's late, Enrich will sleep first. Yes, I will take my leave. What the hell is Imperial Concubine Shin doing? Anyone with a discerning eye can see that she is going against you, Your Highness. His Majesty doesn't even protect you. Yushio looked indignant after leaving the Imperial study. Sitting in the Phoenix carriage, listening to Yushio's complaints, Gu Yuan sneered. The Shun family is no less powerful than my Gu family. His Majesty is so smart. How can he side with someone just because of some trivial things between us women? But in this harem, who doesn't know that you are the Emperor's favorite person? Feng Luan's little hand tightened. Even if everyone knew that she was the Emperor's favorite person, she was still not as important as a dead person in his heart. After returning, find a place to throw away the jade dew ointment that noble consort Shun gave to Bin Gong. Your Highness, you. But the rash on your face hasn't healed yet. Gu Yuan glared at her. Just do as I say. If she says 3 days, then it's 3 days. This consort will not do as she says. Nyang Yang is right. If Nyang Yang follows what Shin Guifei said, and continuously use the Yulu ointment for 3 days, the rash on your face will really disappear. Perhaps the Emperor will value you even more, and this will suit her intentions. However, Nyang Yang, this servant is worried that if Nyang Yang doesn't use the jade dew ointment, what if other conditions appear on your face? Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. She wasn't the only doctor in the world. Moreover, she was a woman from a family of generals. How could she be considered a doctor if she spent all her time wielding swords and spears? After returning to the palace, go to the Imperial Hospital and summon Imperial Physician Lu to me. What medicine did he prescribe for Imperial Consortium? Let him follow the prescription and give Bin Gong a few more. The Empress is wise. Yushio's face was filled with joy. Noble Consort Shin definitely wouldn't have thought that Nyang Yang would have a backup plan. The haze on Gu Yuan's face finally dissipated a little. She smiled coldly. She thinks she's smart and thinks that she can win against me by playing some small tricks. This consort wants to see who will have the last laugh. Let's go. Chapter 49. I heard that the regent broke into Feng Qi Palace today. In the imperial study, after Gu Yuan left, the heavy responsibility of grinding naturally fell to Shan Yueji. Her previous self had ground a lot of ink for Feng Juqing. However, she didn't forget who she was. After a short while of grinding, the entire table was covered in ink. Even her body and face were unavoidably splashed with ink. Feng Juqing raised his eyes and looked at her battered appearance. His warm eyes were tinged with a smile. Gao Dazhong, this servant is here. Bring some water for the imperial consort to clean her face. Shin Yueji wiped her face in a sorry state. Your Majesty, This consort has never ground ink when she was at home. You suddenly gave this heavy responsibility to this consort. This consort can't take it. Hearing her complaining and coquettish tone, and looking at her small face that was covered in ink, Feng Juqing couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and tapped her forehead. Are you feeling sorry for me? Or are you deliberately here to cause trouble? Of course it's because I feel sorry for your majesty. Shun Yueji retorted. My beloved consort hasn't answered my question. Which one? Shin Yueji blinked her watery eyes in confusion. Feng Juqing's expression changed. Imperial consort, are you taking my words for granted? The regent went to Feng Qi Palace to look for you, your majesty. Who knew that just after you left, the regent's face was so cold that it could freeze. This consort was so scared that she couldn't even speak. In the end, it was Shuangshi who told the regent on behalf of this consort that you came to the imperial study. Only then did the regent leave. Imperial consort is afraid of him? Of course. Wherever the regent goes, it's like a person entering an ice palace. It's frozen from top to bottom. At that time, Feng Qi Palace was still warm. When the regent came, it immediately froze. This consort used to be afraid of him, but now this consort is even more afraid. Your Majesty, you can't blame this consort for making the decision without your permission and giving you away, right? If you want to blame someone, blame Shuangshi. This consort didn't intend to betray you. It's all that girl, Shuangshi said. Shuangshi was speechless. Glancing at her, the man laughed involuntarily. If he comes to find me in the future, Gui Fei can just tell him where I am going. Nyang Nyang, this servant has brought the water. Please wash your hands first. Gao Dazhong came in with a basin of water and carefully placed it on the tea table. With her face full of ink, Shun Yueji felt extremely awkward. She quickly got down from the high seat and washed her hands and face. She looked at the basin of clean and transparent water. After her 2 claws dipped into it, it was pitch black. It was quite frightening. Your Majesty, why is the regent looking for you? Chunxia saw that his expression was not good. Could it be that he deliberately came to the palace to find trouble? Hearing this, Gao Dazhong, who was beside her, was shocked and hurriedly nudged her with his arm. He motioned for her not to ask. Hurt by his bump, Shin Yueji angrily turned around and glared at him. What's wrong with asking? Can't you worry about the emperor? When Imo Wushang was mentioned, she could sense the displeasure on the emperor's face. However, Feng Juqing was not a person who got angry easily. When he got angry, he would usually give you the cold shoulder. When it came to women, he would never severely reprimand or punish them. I didn't expect the imperial consort's delicate body to know how to cook. He had just tasted a few mouthfuls of the date porridge. After such a long delay, it had already turned cold. She saw the man pick up the bowl of date porridge again. Chapter 50. Feng Juqing smiled. It's not cold. The temperature is just right. Shin Yueji scratched her head in embarrassment. I loved sweet things when I was a child in the mansion, and eating candied dates is good for the body. I don't know what your majesty likes. I only know that your majesty has been busy with official business and hasn't had a meal. So I took the liberty to send your majesty my favorite candied date porridge. This candied date tastes better with some raisins. It's sweet and sour. I used to like to cook them together. Then why did you put 9 candied dates? Is there a meaning? 9 candied dates represents a long time. When my mother cooks for my father, she also likes to put 9 candied dates so that they can be together forever. It turns out that General Shun and Madame Shun also have such a mood. The man laughed and restrained the disappointment that flashed in his eyes. He didn't even know what he was looking forward to. A pair of warm hands were on his shoulders. The man's straight body stiffened. Shin Yueji massaged his back thoughtfully. Your Majesty, don't your shoulders hurt after sitting for a long time? I used to massage my father's shoulders like this when I was at home. Cheener. What? What did your Majesty call me just now? Jeer. Feng Juqing's handsome face was pale and soft. It gave people the feeling that a beauty was sick and pitiful. Compared with Gu Yuan's weakness, Feng Juqing's beauty was beyond that of a man and a woman. How could Gu Yuan compare? The man smiled. Shin Yueji, This name is very good. Hearing this, Shin Yueji also smiled. My father didn't read much. I don't know who told him that Ji is a title for a woman's beauty. He directly added the word, Ji, to my name. Feng Juqing's lips twitched and he smiled silently. Accompanying the man to read the memorials, Shin Yueji could hold on for a while at first. But later, her eyelids began to struggle and she was very sleepy. If you're sleepy, go back and rest. The emperor didn't raise his head, but his gentle voice sounded. Shin Yueji shuddered and sobered up. She stared at the man's handsome face for a while. It's at least midnight. Your Highness, it's already past midnight, Gao Dazhong cautiously reminded him. Does His Majesty read through memorials until so late every day? I have just ascended the throne and am very busy with the affairs of the court. I have to discuss matters with the ministers every day. The memorial can only be delayed until nightfall. Feng Juqing smiled. Even the Empress has never accompanied me until this late. Imperial consort is the first. Shin Yueji curled her lips. That's because Your Majesty loves Empress older sister and doesn't want Empress older sister to stay up late with Your Majesty. This concubine comes from a family of generals, and my body is much stronger than the women in the boudoir. His Majesty is bored of being alone, so he did not chase this concubine away to make this imperial study more lively. Imperial concubine, His Majesty has allowed you to stay here, which is a great favor. In this harem, who knows how many concubines can't even think of coming here? Gao Dazhong blushed with shame. This eldest miss of the Shin family really dared to talk nonsense. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with the emperor's expression, and Gao Dazhong's heart was finally at ease. With imperial consort chattering in my ears, I do feel less tired. Shin Yueji found a round chair and sat down. She rested her chin on her hand, and her almond-shaped eyes were hazy. What's so good about being an emperor? It's not as good as being an ordinary person, eating and drinking when they want, and sleeping when they're tired. Chapter 51. After a long time, she saw that the man couldn't help but loosen the strength of his hand, and his gentle eyes looked at her. Guifei is right. It's really not good to be the emperor. There are too many involuntary actions. He put down the memorial in his hand and walked towards her slowly. Seeing this, Shin Yueji immediately sat up straight. Emperor, I just said it casually. Don't be angry. Why should I be angry? Gao Dazhong, bring me a coat. Yes, Emperor. Where is the emperor going? You will know when you get there. The man's voice was a little melancholy, and after saying this, he went out. Shin Yueji reacted and quickly caught up. Feng Juqing didn't call the dragon carriage. The night was very dark, and the thin moonlight was cold and could only illuminate some roads. Zhang Huai took a cloak and quickly caught up. He carried a lamp in his hand and quickly ran to the front of the emperor to light the way. Emperor, the wind is cold and dew is heavy at night. Put on your coat first. Be careful not to catch a cold. Taking the cloak he handed over, Feng Juqing pulled the little woman who was struggling to catch up with him to the front and put it on her personally. Shin Yueji was flattered. Emperor, do you love me so much? The man raised his eyebrows. The night was as cold as water, and his gentle eyes were a little more cold. What do you mean by this, Guifei? Do you think I don't love you? No, I just think oh. Her head was flicked by him. Shin Yueji felt pain and covered her aching head. Why did the emperor hit me? Keep up. Shin Yueji's almond-shaped eyes glared at him and angrily followed behind him. The man didn't walk fast, but he was tall and slender. She had to take 2 small steps to catch up with him. The night was very dark, and the lamp in Gao Dazhong's hand could only see a small piece of road in front of him. The road in front of her became more and more familiar. At the end of the road, Shin Yueji looked up at the familiar palace. The 3 big characters of Daoyang Palace were once given by him. She lowered her voice, and her eyes were shining and cold. Emperor, why did you bring me to the former empress's palace? Feng Juqing didn't speak, and naturally didn't notice her reaction. He stepped into the hall without saying a word. Gao Dazhong tactfully went in and lit the candles, illuminating everything in the main hall. It was still the same as before and had not changed at all. It was still clean and spotless. The huge Daoyang Palace had not been completely abandoned because of her departure. Shin Yueji bit her lips. So there are people who clean this Daoyang Palace every day. This concubine thought that it was covered in cobwebs. This place is still the same as before. Every day, I will let them come in and clean. The man lowered his head and smiled faintly, his big hand landing on the small square tea set on the coffee table. Every day, when I'm tired from reviewing memorials, I'll come here to take a look. What are you looking at? These 3 words stunned Feng Jiqing. His pitch-black eyes flashed with complex and painful emotions. We also do not know exactly what we have come here to see. But he came here, this place, would make him feel warm, would warm his heart. It would make him feel that he was not alone, and that there was a familiar aura accompanying him. Just now, she said that what was so good about being an emperor? He couldn't be like the ordinary people, eating and sleeping when he wanted. He was burdened with so much responsibility. He didn't know why, but he suddenly wanted to come here to take a look. It was empty, and he couldn't see anything. Chapter 52. Things remain the same, but the people have changed. Shin Yueji looked at the palace that she once yearned for. Now she saw it again, and her heart was already indifferent. This palace was given to her by him. Everything inside was arranged according to her preferences. She liked it very much. At the same time, her life was also personally ended by him here. No matter how cleanly the empty hall was cleaned, there was not a hint of humanity in it. Shin Yueji felt a layer of ice spreading from the soles of her feet, and her whole body was cold. Your Highness, what's wrong with you? Why do you look so pale? Gao Dazhong looked at her with a worried face. The man looked at her when he heard the voice, took her hand and frowned slightly. How did your hand become so cold? Did your Majesty like the late Empress? Hearing her sudden question, Feng Jiqing's worried eyes dimmed slightly, and he turned away lightly. After a long time, he said, she and I were husband and wife for 9 years. She also felt that they were husband and wife for 9 years. 9 years, a whole 9 years. Shin Yueji silently twitched her lips and suddenly smiled. A whole 9 years, not as much as Gu Yuan's provocative words. For a whole 9 years, just because he saw her lying on the bed with another man in disheveled clothes, did not listen to her explanation, and did not give her a chance to prove her innocence. An imperial edict abolished her empress title and drowned her in the South Lake. Before she died, Gu Yuan tortured her in every way, but he turned a blind eye. Your Majesty was so good to the late empress, but the late empress still did such a thing. She deserved to die. Because of her words, the man's handsome eyebrows froze instantly, and his dark eyes were not as gentle and melancholy as before. In an instant, a layer of frost climbed up his dark eyes. When I entered the palace, I also heard that the late empress's face was set with 9 thick nails by the empress sister. I think the empress sister also felt injustice for your Majesty. No wonder your Majesty likes the empress sister so much. It's late at night, imperial concubine. Go back? Gao Dazhong. Your servant is here. Send imperial concubine back to the bedroom. The man left a faint sentence, and then turned to the inner hall, no longer caring about her. Your Highness, let's go. Daoyang Palace isn't far from my palace. With double happiness following me, it's better for eunuch Gao to stay here and serve his Majesty. Gao Dazhong carefully peered inside, replying to your Highness, when the emperor comes to Daoyang Palace, he basically doesn't need anyone to accompany him. If it was in the past, this servant would wait outside and never dare to enter to disturb the emperor. He was the one who ordered the death of the late empress. If you really like her, don't kill her. Why are you pretending to be so devoted now? If she didn't know this man too well, Shin Yueji would have been deceived by him for the second time. Gao Dazhong was so scared that he almost covered her mouth with his hand. He looked around in fear and said, My dear lady, don't talk nonsense. You might be beheaded. This is a matter of the imperial family. This servant and the empress are outsiders, so how can we understand the emperor's thoughts? Your Highness, please return quickly. Your Highness, look at yourself. It wasn't easy for you to make His Majesty pay attention to you, but you're spouting nonsense again. This is great. His Majesty will definitely be unhappy. After exiting the Martin Sun Palace, Double Happiness had a look of disapproval on her face. Shin Yueji didn't look at her. It's good that he's unhappy. If he's unhappy, I'm happy. Double Happiness. After a long time. Your Highness, why did you enter the palace? Of course, to find trouble with them. What else? Chapter 53. Swoosh, swoosh. Your Highness, there's a sound. Suddenly, there was a sound in front of them, and Double Happiness instantly stopped talking. Her face was alert. The two of them had not gone far, and the Jiaoyang Palace behind them was not far. And this intermittent xiao xiao sound obviously came from the front. Moreover, this sound seemed to be the sound of drinking water. In the dead of night, one could even hear the sound of gulping. In the middle of the night, in the Jiaoyang Palace, the former Empress' bedroom, who would run here to drink water? It was dark in front of them. Other than some flowers, there was no pond. Your Highness, wait here first. I'll go take a look. Double Happiness lowered her voice and said in her ear. She was about to follow the sound and sneak up to take a look. Shin Yueji's eyes narrowed. She grabbed her hand and pulled her to another place. The night was dim, and the thin light was as hazy as the first light of dawn. Shin Yueji hid behind a thick pile of grass. The thick flowers and grass covered her thin and delicate body. She carefully pushed aside a corner of the grass and saw a man and a woman lying 7 steps away from them. To be precise, one was lying down and the other was lying down. The smell of blood was faint. Perhaps because they were far away, the dark red blood slowly spread across the flat ground. Double Happiness covered her mouth in shock to prevent herself from screaming out because of the intense fear. And Yang, does he have 2 heads? This servant. Is this servant seeing things wrongly? Shin Yueji's beautiful face became more serious. You're not seeing things. He really has 2 heads. Human body, 2 legs, 2 arms, only 2 heads. The man was dressed in black. His body was straight and slender. His 2 heads were buried in the woman's neck, biting and drinking blood. The whooshing and blood-drinking sounds just now had come from his mouth. How could this be? Double Happiness looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. In the past, when she was in the mansion, she had followed her ladyship and eldest young master to many places and witnessed many strange things and people. However, this was the first time in her life that she had seen a person with 2 heads and a thirst for blood. When did such a monster enter the palace? Empress, what should we do now? Should I tell His Majesty? Shin Yueji furrowed her brows and stared at the 2-headed blood-drinking monster not far away. The woman under him was dressed like a palace maid. It seemed that she was a pitiful palace maid who woke up at night. The man lay on the woman's body and bit a few more times until the blood was sucked dry. Only then did he reluctantly leave the little palace maid's neck. He turned and lay on the ground. He stuck out his tongue and licked the fresh blood that flowed on the ground clean. The man's face was pale and bloodless, and his 2 heads had 2 different faces. One was resolute and handsome, while the other was feminine and seductive. Shin Yueji was surprised that a monster could have such a refined appearance. After the man had finished licking the blood off the ground, he finally stood up and left with an unsatisfied expression. He headed towards Diaoyang Palace, his tall and slender figure slowly disappearing at the end of Diaoyang Palace. Seeing him walk away, Shin Yueji quickly got up and walked in front of the palace maid. His face was ashen. All the blood in his body had been sucked dry. His pale face was shrinking rapidly. Chapter 54. Your Highness, there's no need to inform His Majesty. This man left her body here so openly. It's obvious that he wants the people in the palace to find it. It's almost dawn. Let's return to the palace first. Otherwise, people will be suspicious. She felt that what she said made sense. Plus, the harem was a place of trouble. Shuangxi nodded heavily. Your Highness is smart. This servant will listen to you. Nighttime. It was a sleepless night. Shin Yueji returned to Phoenix Perch Palace. Because of what happened on the way, she was no longer sleepy. Shuangxi thoughtfully poured a cup of tea for her. Nyang, This servant feels that there is something fishy about this matter. Even if we don't tell His Majesty, we should inform the general and eldest young master. Otherwise, we don't know what this unknown monster's purpose in entering the palace is. What if he hurts Nyang Nyang? Shin Yueji frowned. This monster clearly just entered the palace. There has never been a case of a palace maid being bitten in the neck before. Moreover, the palace is heavily guarded. How did he get in? Your Highness suspects that this monster is being manipulated by someone behind the scenes? Shun Yueji nodded. Not only that. Think about it. Why would this monster appear near Diaoyang Palace? Although Diaoyang Palace was abandoned by the previous empress, there are palace maids and eunuchs cleaning it every day. Moreover, compared to other concubines, there are also palace maids and eunuchs walking around Diaoyang Palace every day. Once something happens or someone dies, the news will spread throughout the palace immediately. Your Highness, you mean, did someone set their sights on the late empress and made use of the late empress's bluff to achieve their own goals? That's right. But who could it be? Shen Yueji's previous self had also stayed in the palace for a few days. Other than some concubines who entered the palace earlier, she was from a prestigious family. She would never be related to these two monsters. Or, when does the Prince Regent enter the palace? This servant heard that the Prince Regent enters the palace every day. However, he goes to Diaoyang Palace every time. He enters the palace every day? Shin Yueji narrowed her eyes. Imo Wushang's martial arts are strong. Even if he doesn't have an identity, he can still come and go as he pleases in the inner palace. Just now, this consort guessed that this monster had just entered the palace. However, even if it had just entered the palace, it was impossible for it to have set its sights on the Diaoyang Palace so quickly. This must have been premeditated. This two-headed man has long been hiding in the harem. Nyang Nyang, this servant remembers. When this servant passed through the imperial garden, this servant even heard the people in the palace say that two palace maids had disappeared for no reason at Diaoyang Palace. Because their statuses were low, Steward Li suppressed this matter for fear of alarming His Majesty. There are also people who speculate that the palace maid did not serve well and was sentenced to death by the regent. So you're saying that Imo Wushang knows about this? Your Highness suspects the regent? No. Shin Yueji shook her head and said, I'm only suspecting that he might know something about this matter. I'm not suspecting that he's the mastermind. Why? Double Happiness was puzzled. If Imo Wushang really knows about this, then the two-headed man has indeed entered the palace for a long time. Moreover, we saw him make a move near Diaoyang Palace. He had the intention to expose the palace maids' corpses to the public. Chapter 55. I'm guessing that it's very likely that this two-headed monster was indeed targeting Diaoyang Palace and wanted to expose the palace maid's corpse to the public. However, it was later disposed of by someone else. So until now, apart from a few insignificant and lowly palace maids who have gone missing, there are no other disturbances in the harem. Did the regent dispose of those palace maids' corpses? Meeting Double Happiness's doubtful eyes, Shun Yueji pinched a piece of pastry and slowly sent it into her mouth. How's the qinggong? Very good. If that's the case, go to Diaoyang Palace again and see if the palace maid's corpse is still there. Yes, Your Highness. Your Highness. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Double Happiness returned. She ran in from outside the hall, panting. It's gone. It's really gone. This servant went to the place where we were hiding and found that the ground was empty. Not to mention any corpses. Even the blood on the ground had been cleaned up by some fresh soil. There was nothing left, and the smell of blood was gone. But the person in Diaoyang Palace today is the Emperor. Does the Emperor know? Shin Yueji's little hand tapped on the table. If the Emperor knew, the harem would not be so quiet. Although the Emperor is in Diaoyang Palace, what if the regent is also there? Your Highness, with the regent's ability, it's easy for him to not be discovered by the Emperor. It seems that my guess is correct. Some people want to use the death of the late Empress to bluff, while others don't want them to disturb the late Empress' peace. Thinking of that cold and handsome face, Shin Yueji's eyes flickered. Imo Wushang had been guarding her bedroom when she was alive. No matter what happened in the harem or how big the commotion was, he had always been an outsider. Only those who were related to her, he would kill them. However, he only killed some insignificant corpses. As for the mastermind and the two-headed monster, did he already know about it? But because it was not beneficial to the emperor, he allowed them to mess around in the harem? He went against Feng Juqing and everything, and the life and death of the harem had nothing to do with him. There were evil people causing trouble in the harem, but they didn't report it and let innocent people die. This Imo Wushang, did they want to rebel? Including the palace maids from before and the ones tonight. Quite a few have died. The emperor and the people in the palace still did not know about it. Moreover, every palace maid had died in Daoyang Palace. If the people in the palace found out, would they misunderstand that it was the ghost of the late empress causing trouble? That's the two-headed monster's goal. There were only a few people who would believe the words two-headed man from our mouths. It was too unimaginable. The palace maid who was bitten to death by the two-headed monster had 2 bloody wounds on her neck, and her face was purple. In the eyes of others, it was obvious that she had been scared to death. As for the wound on my neck, Shun Yueji stretched out her hand. Her previous self liked to keep her nails long, but after possessing Shun Yueji's body, she had adapted to the habit of the previous owner of this body. If you say that the wounds on their necks were caused by someone strangling them to death with their fingernails, no one would doubt it. Your Highness is right. The 2 bloody wounds on that palace maid's neck, if you don't look carefully, really look like they were caused by fingernails. Looking up at the dark moonlight outside the hall, Shun Yueji said lightly, "It's almost dawn. Take a short nap. When the sun rises, follow me to Daoyang Palace." Chapter 56. Your Highness. She heard Double Happiness whispering in her ear. Shun Yueji slowly opened her eyes. She subconsciously looked out of the window. It's dawn so soon? Then she looked at Double Happiness. You didn't sleep all night? I was asleep and suddenly heard the wind outside. I felt something was wrong, so I went out to have a look. Your Highness, Yulu ointment? Taking the Yulu ointment from Double Happiness, Shun Yueji pursed her lips. Didn't you give it to the Empress? Why is it here? Just now Eunuch Gao came. He saw your Highness sleeping soundly, so he gave it to me. Eunuch Gao said that this Yulu ointment was dug out under the tree in Xiang'e Palace. The Empress buried the antidote I gave her? Little Zhuazi was promoted by Eunuch Gao and finally arranged to be in Xiang'e Palace. What he said is credible. He saw Yueshio run to the back of Xiang'e Palace in the middle of the night with this Yulu ointment and buried it. Shun Yueji didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Gu Yuan, in order to get rid of me, she really doesn't care about her own face. She laughed at herself. I've only been in the palace for a short time, but she thinks so highly of me. Should I be proud or happy? This little girl of the Gu family is really scheming. She buried the Yulu ointment, but the rash on her face can't go away. The method you gave her didn't work, and she made the Empress suffer for a few days. If this falls into the ears of the Emperor, I'm afraid that the Emperor will give you the cold shoulder again when he finally values you. Shun Yueji stretched and said carelessly, she doesn't need to do this. The Emperor has no interest in me now. Your Highness, what are you talking about? You don't remember many times in front of the Emperor. You always mention the Empress, but the Emperor will give you the cold shoulder for a few days at most. But this Gu Yuan is making things worse. The girl chuckled. She is not making things worse, but providing charcoal in a snowstorm. After putting away the Yulu ointment, Shun Yueji rubbed her sore neck. Help me freshen up. After eating, come with me to Daoyang Palace. Shuangshi took 2 steps and turned in front of her. Your Highness, this time when you see the Prince Regent, you can't be so careless anymore. The Regent is actually quite pitiful. Shun Yueji didn't know which words provoked her, but she covered her mouth and coughed a few times. How is it pitiful? To the late Empress, Double Happiness blinked. I was almost strangled to death by him in the Imperial Garden. Why don't you say that I'm pitiful? Who asked you to provoke the Prince Regent? Girl who is siding with an outsider. Go prepare the meal. Sob. Yes. The man was wearing a purple and gold robe, his black hair hanging down his back. A cool breeze blew across his face, and a few strands of messy hair stuck to his handsome face, fluttering in the wind. This was the scene that Shun Yueji saw when she arrived at Diaoyang Palace. The man's body carried a faint aura that was hidden in the city. His obsidian-sharp eyes flashed with a sharp light. He sat under the pavilion of Diaoyang Palace, holding a jar of wine in his hand. He looked into the distance, lost in thought. From time to time, he would drink a few mouthfuls of wine, accompanied by a few violent coughs. The man stretched out his hand and wiped away the sparkling water stains at the corner of his mouth. His light red thin lips were incomparably delicate. The wine stains on them were like morning dew on a lotus leaf. Chapter 57. The look in his eyes was sometimes sharp, sometimes cold, sometimes painful, and sometimes complicated. All kinds of feelings intertwined. In the end, it was just a few mouthfuls of liquor, which led to a few heart-wrenching coughs. It was the first time that Shin Yueji saw a Wushang like this. He had always been high and mighty. He was not an emperor, but more majestic than one. Now, there seemed to be another world in his eyes. Under his ruthless and cold eyes, there were thousands of emotions. This was a beautiful picture. The handsome man, the quiet pavilion. The man was like a youth walking out of a splash ink painting. She couldn't bear to disturb him. But, cough, cough. She covered her mouth and coughed heavily. Behind her, Double Happiness didn't know what rules were anymore. He just wanted to hit her with his arm. Sure enough, after she coughed heavily, the man's cold and gloomy eyes instantly shot towards her like a sharp glass. At that moment, she was riddled with holes. Shin Yueji couldn't help but shiver. She rubbed her arms for a while, then bravely walked towards the pavilion. She took a few steps. The man's eyes were even colder. Get out. The regent is here too. I have nothing to do, so I came to see the former empress. I didn't expect to meet you. Pretending not to see the man's cold face, Shun Yueji continued to walk forward. The surrounding ice flames were dropping rapidly. Shin Yueji sneered. I was afraid that I would meet the regent, so I put on a few more clothes today. I didn't expect, haha. I'm still so cold, Double Happiness. The man's cold aura didn't decrease, but increased. Shin Yueji was used to it. She swaggered across the pavilion, went straight in, and sat down. She wasn't close to the man, separated by a stone table. Actually, I'm also here to see the regent. I have something important to discuss with the regent. Can you retract the cold air from your body first? It's so cold. What do you want from me? I didn't control my strength last time and accidentally hurt your hand. Is it better now? Shin Yueji looked at his big hand and saw that it wasn't bandaged or applied medicine. The bleeding had stopped, but the bloody holes were very obvious. Above each wound, there was a large swollen area. Shin Yueji really blamed herself in her heart. The man's aura was imposing, and his pair of gloomy eyes were cold and gloomy. After a long time, his thin lips slowly opened. Accidentally? Shun Yueji, Shuangshi was speechless. Are you stupid, my lady? She didn't expect the man to answer her. Hadn't he always been disdainful of talking to others? Shin Yueji had predicted this, which was why she didn't mean what she said. Who would have thought that he would really find a way to continue the conversation? The smile on her lips froze as she met the man's dark eyes. At that time, the Prince Regent almost choked me to death. What I did was self-defense. Imo Wushang stared back coldly. She had planned to please him first. Seeing the man's reaction, Shin Yueji straightened her face. Since the regent doesn't give me face, I'll just say it directly. I want to confirm something with the regent. Silence. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth and raised her voice slightly. Last night, I followed the emperor to this Diaoyang palace. Still silence. Chapter 58. He coughed so hard that it felt like he was going to cough out his internal organs. Shin Yueji pursed her lips as she listened to the sound. Was he doing this because of her? She didn't know where the courage came from, but she took a step forward and snatched the wine jar from his hand. He didn't expect her to be so daring. Imo Wushang didn't react for a moment as his hand was empty. Seeing the man's expression gradually turn ugly, The dangerous aura around him dropped rapidly. Double happiness. Your Highness. Shun Yueji glared at him. Can't you see that the regent's wine is gone? Why don't you go get some wine? Double happiness. Huh. What are you waiting for? Bring the best wine in the palace to the regent. Oh, yes, yes, yes. I'll go get it now. I'll go get it now. Double happiness repeatedly agreed and disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Only she and Imo Wushang were left in the quiet pavilion. Shin Yueji pursed her lips and put the wine jar on the stone table. She sat opposite him and looked straight into his cold eyes. I heard from Ji Chu that you haven't eaten anything since the late empress passed away. A normal person would have starved to death if they didn't eat for 7 days, like my big brother. Because I entered the palace, I didn't eat or drink for 7 days. In the end, I couldn't hold on anymore. My parents ordered people to press my head down and force me to eat a few mouthfuls of hot porridge. With your status as the regent, no one would dare to do this to you, right? How did you survive until now? After a long silence, Shin Yueji tried to ease the atmosphere. She knew that the man wouldn't pay attention to her. She continued to say to herself, the Prince Regent's life is really tough. You want me to die? Isn't it good to be alive? Why do you want to die? The Regent is such an outstanding person. If you die, who knows how many people in the world will be happy? He didn't say anything again. Why don't you eat something? She saw that there were a few plates of snacks on the stone table. In this deserted Diaoyang palace, it was obviously his subordinates who had placed them for him. But he didn't move. She pinched a piece of pastry and put it in her mouth to taste. Compared to the desserts I ate in the perching Phoenix Palace, they taste great. She felt the man's gaze fall on her body. Shin Yueji couldn't eat any more after a few. She looked up at him resentfully. You're the one who didn't want to eat. I just ate a few more because I was hungry. Why are you looking at me like that? Shin Yueji felt embarrassed no matter how thick-skinned she was when he stared at her. She silently put the pastry that she had secretly taken back into the box. He muttered, as a man, can you not be so stingy? I only ate a few of your pastries. But speaking of which, the man ignored him. Shin Yueji was quiet for a while, then picked up an osmanthus cake and put it in her mouth. She said vaguely, yesterday, you went to the palace to find the emperor and asked the emperor to issue an edict saying that you want to drain the water of South Lake. What happened? Imo Wushang's eyes were filled with a layer of sharpness. What does it have to do with you? Chapter 59. Let's not talk about where to put the drained water, which place can hold such a large area of water in South Lake. Secondly, what if the bottom of South Lake is empty and you can't find the body of the former empress? Rather than the regent spending his time on this, it's better to manage the affairs in the palace. This way, it can be considered as seeking justice for the former empress. The man's cold eyes looked at her. What do you want to say? Yesterday, Double Happiness and I came out of Diaoyang Palace and saw a two-headed man sucking the blood of a palace maid. She didn't see the change on the man's face. Not to mention surprise, there was no fluctuation in his expression. Shin Yueji was even more certain that he already knew about this matter. Her heart leaped with joy, and she subconsciously sat close to the man. Seeing the man's unapproachable cold aura spread again, she hurriedly retreated in fright. After that man killed the palace maid, he turned and left. The palace maid's body was left in place, obviously waiting for the people in the palace to find it the next day. However, when I asked Double Happiness to go back to take a look, I found that the palace maid's body had long disappeared. Not only that, even the pool of blood on the ground and the blood-stained soil had been turned over by new soil. There was no trace of struggle. At first, I suspected that the two-headed man had just entered the palace. But then I thought about it. The palace is heavily guarded. How could he enter the palace so easily without anyone noticing? There must be someone controlling him from behind. You suspect me? If I suspected the regent, I wouldn't have come to the regent. I was thinking that this two-headed monster has someone behind him, and that person has been in the palace for a long time. Previously, I also heard that many palace maids in Diaoyang Palace went missing. Because of their low status, they were suppressed. Of course, There are also people who put the name of the disappearance of the palace maids on the regent's head, saying that you executed them. The man's eyes were cold, filled with a faint cold light. So I was thinking that the regent had long known that there was someone in the palace causing trouble, but because they used the name of the former empress, the regent didn't want the former empress to be disturbed. So he found someone to dispose of the bodies of the palace maids behind her back? Seeing the man's cold eyes suddenly narrow, her appearance, which was difficult to paint on a painting scroll, was like a cold and arrogant statue at the top of an iceberg. I am very gratified that the Prince Regent treats the late Empress so well. The icy aura around the man dissipated a little. What are you relieved about? I'm glad I didn't fall in love with the wrong person. There was another long period of silence. The eldest daughter of the Shin family had been pestering him for many years, but every time she saw him, it was like a mouse seeing a cat. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with lust, and she did not dare to approach him, purposely causing a huge commotion, humiliating themselves, injuring others, or acting arrogantly. All of it was to attract his attention. Every time this happened, he would scoff at it. For her to take the initiative to say that she liked him was very different from the last 2 times they met. He didn't hate her as much as he used to. In fact, he even felt a sense of familiarity with her, even if Mo Wuxiang was unwilling to admit it. However, the feeling that spread out from his heart would not deceive him. From the first word she had uttered against him, a bold supposition had formed in his mind. Chapter 60. He was willing to let her get close to him without touching her. He was willing to listen to her say such bold words. She had repeatedly violated his taboo. He did not want to hurt her. He knew that she was not her, but there was a shadow of her in her. Mo Wuxiang resisted this feeling from the bottom of his heart. He felt that he had betrayed Shin Yueji. But Shun Yueji, whether it was her actions, her tone of speech, even her expression, when she was angry, they were all so similar to her. He simply could not bear to hurt her. He tried hard to ignore it. He tried hard not to think about it. He tried hard to hide the strange look in his eyes. Gu Yueqin was unique in this world. He did not want anyone to become her shadow, swaying in front of him. He did not want to disappoint Gu Yueqin. His feelings for her. Gu Yueqin was irreplaceable in this world. The feeling that Shin Yueji gave him was not the same appearance. It was not a deliberate imitation. Sometimes, it made him think that she was her. When you love someone, it is deep in your bones. Her behavior, temperament, and demeanor have long been engraved in your heart. It was not that Mo Wuxiang did not doubt it. He did not dare to believe those so-called nonsense. At the same time, he longed to believe it. If it was really like that, but why did she not acknowledge him? Did she hate him that much? Or did she still not let go of him after how he treated her? She still wanted to enter the palace to accompany him. Every time he thought of this, Mo Wuxiang's heart would be swallowed by endless anger. His cold heart was bitten and burned by the fire. That kind of pain was as if someone was holding a dagger and stabbing his heart. His heart was riddled with holes and dripping with blood. Why do you want to enter the palace? The sudden question made Shin Yueji a little confused. Shin Yueji subconsciously bit her finger. The man's sharp eyes suddenly narrowed and fell on her index finger in her mouth. Some habits were done subconsciously. Perhaps even she did not know it. Such a habit had long taken root in his heart. Mo Wuxiang's eyes suddenly jumped violently. There seemed to be countless flames jumping in them. His heart gradually became so intense that it was difficult to control. He could choose not to believe these so-called absurd remarks. Over the years, he had traveled to various countries and seen many unimaginable things happen, such as the 2 men that appeared in the palace. Although such a thing was strange and hard to believe, it did exist. She saw the way the man looked at her changed. It became urgent, expectant, and mixed with many emotions that Shan Yueji couldn't understand, just like her previous self. She panicked for a moment and suppressed the uneasiness in her heart. "Regent, are you drunk?" She pushed the dessert in front of her towards him. "Why don't you eat something? Trying to cool down the alcohol?" The man looked at her deeply. A pair of cold eyes seemed to be able to see through her. "Why do you want to enter the palace?" he asked again. His voice wasn't as cold as before. Shin Yueji didn't know if it was an illusion, but she heard a trace of humanity in his voice. Eh. Chapter 61. If you don't want to say it, I won't force you. Shun Yueji. He was a little more human. Did he fall from the high and mighty sky to the mortal world? Did he gain some humanity? Don't be like this. I'm a little panicked. When Shuangxi comes back, I'll ask her to bring you some hangover soup. The man became silent. His eyes seemed to be bright and dark. She didn't know what he was thinking. Shin Yueji originally wanted to ask him about the two-headed man, but now that Imo Wushang was acting like this, she was scared. She knew this man the best. His sudden change of tone made her think that this guy was possessed by a ghost. She slowly got up from the stone bench. It's getting late. I should go back. The future is long. Let's talk again in the future if there's a chance. These desserts were her favorite when she was alive. Imo Wushang picked up a piece of pastry and slowly put it in his mouth. The moment the pastry entered his mouth, the greasy sweetness instantly filled his mouth. Such a sweet taste, in this world, only she alone could resist it. I like to eat sweet things since I was young. No matter how sweet the pastry is, I can resist it. Shin Yueji glanced at him. The feeling that Imo Wushang gave her, she didn't know if it was her illusion. She always felt that he saw through her. She and Feng Juqing were husband and wife for 9 years. Some of the actions she did in front of him, she deliberately did it. He didn't suspect anything. Perhaps there was something that Shen Yueji herself had overlooked. That was, in front of Feng Juqing, she deliberately did some of the habits she had when she was alive. But in front of Imo Wushang, she did it subconsciously, unconsciously. But the daughter of the Shun family doesn't like to eat sweet things. The man murmured to himself, Master, this is the first time you've eaten in these days. In the pavilion. After Shan Yueji left, Jichu's tall and slender figure appeared in front of the man. His voice couldn't hide the joy in it. I won't return to the residence tonight. Master? Jichu looked at him in confusion. Master, are you going to stay in Daoyang Palace tonight? Imo Wushang looked indifferent. Master previously ordered us to drain the South Lake. Now, we are waiting for Master's order. If Master does not make the arrangements, we do not know what to do. Let's put this matter aside for now. I have something I need to confirm. Jichu was puzzled. In his master's heart, the eldest miss of the Gu family had always been the center of attention. He really couldn't think of anything that could be more important than the eldest miss of the Gu family. Imo Wushang gently pinched the osmanthus cake with his fingertips until the pieces of cake slowly dispersed from his palm. He needed to confirm Shan Yueji's identity. It was impossible for a person's temperament to change so quickly. It was impossible for two complete strangers to have the same preferences and the same behavior. Moreover, they would never fall in love with the same man at the same time. He had always chosen to ignore Shin Yueji's feelings for him. He had also seen the love she had for him in her eyes. Just like how he treated Gu Yueqin, cautious and fearful. How could such feelings change so quickly in just a few days? On the day Gu Yueqin was drowned in the lake, she had been pushed into the lake. Imo Wushang was an extremely intelligent person. Previously, he had been so engrossed in Gu Yueqin that he had forgotten about the lively Shen Yueji in front of him. When he carefully observed her, he realized that the feeling and palpitation that Shen Yueji gave him was the same as when he was facing Gu Yueqin. He couldn't help but tighten the pastry in his fingers. His fair hands clenched into fists. He wanted to confirm the ridiculous idea in his heart with a trace of expectation. If not for, he would definitely kill Shan Yueji with his own hands. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.